Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide, sa strana svih, sa juga i sjevera, kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, srcem Tita, rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva i u sjaju žita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode,
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It is the evening of the 11th of July, 2024, and we are here today to discuss the outcomes of the NATO. I think the most polite words to describe it would be, or term rather to describe it would be clusterfuck over in Washington, D.C. An exercise in self-deception and papering over the cracks. So we will be getting to that in just a moment. We will be getting also to the allegations made by George Galloway of electoral fraud in the British election, and of course the game being played in France by a certain Monsieur Macron. You may have heard of him. Now, let us therefore turn to the first item on the agenda, and that is, of course, the NATO conference, which, of course, was held in Washington. And our beloved leader, a certain Sir Keir Starmer, allegedly leader of the Labour Party, an alleged human being, attended this and looked jolly pleased to be there, as he always does in these things. Keir Starmer, what makes him such a perfect servant of the British ruling class is that he's one of those guys who's delighted to be in a room with what he regards as important people. Proximity to power is what really appeals to him. Even when he's the one who's meant to be in power, he has an awareness that the office of Prime Minister has been awarded to him on the basis that he behaves well and delivers for his sponsors, the ruling class. So he likes being close to them as a sort of an eager schoolboy. And this is why he doesn't project any power or authority whatsoever, because he comes across as a sort of a particularly mean and bitchy high school prefect, if you were a school which had those kind of things. So we dive into the horrors of the NATO summit, and we're going to look at the final communique here. So I'm going to share the screen with you here so you can see it. You should be able to all see that now. So this is the communique. What I've done is I've started at point 15, which is where it starts to get interesting. Though we could, of course, mention point 13, where they reaffirm their absolute commitment to invoking Article 5, maybe. Bombast and waffle, maybe. But really, it's point 15 onwards that it starts to get actually substantive. Most of the rest of it is just, standard, we are determined, we have grown the alliance, we are stronger than ever stuff. The exact same copy that they put out last year. They've put it out again this year. We are gathering here with Sweden and Finland, and we have grown NATO, etc., etc. Self-congratulatory nonsense designed to cover up deep weaknesses. So we begin with point 15, and this has got a series of points coming up with regard to Zelensky. So I'm going to read point 15 to you in full. We look forward to meeting with President Zelensky. First lie, nobody looks forward to meeting with Zelensky, except perhaps his dealer. In the NATO-Ukraine Council, which is, again, that's a meaningless body which has been set up to give Ukraine the appearance of getting closer to NATO membership, when in actual fact it's never been further away. We reaffirm our unwavering solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Well, that's a lie. The people of Ukraine are, of course, being sacrificed by the US imperialists in the heroic defense of their nation, their land, and our shared values. What are those exactly? Has anybody ever made those clear? A strong, independent, and democratic Ukraine is vital for security and stability of the Euro-Atlantic area. There's another term I hate, Euro-Atlantic. But let's go through that one by one. Strong, it definitely wasn't that before 2022. Independent, well, it had lost what independence it had to mainly US imperialism, because the US was essentially running the entire operation even prior to 2022, and much more so now. Prior to 2022, as we've said before, and I will reiterate now, we've got proof that there were US government advisors attached to all the major ministries in the Kiev government. They were essentially running the government. Many of the puppets in Ukraine now are either people who have US citizenship or are looking to obtain it. For instance, the clown that's the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament is apparently on the way to getting his US passport. That's Ruslan Stefanchuk, apparently. So apparently he's on his way to getting a US passport. We know that Zelensky has interest in the United States, as will Yermak, and the rest of them will as well. So the people running Ukraine are US placemen, and some of them are US citizens. So again, strong, independent, and democratic Ukraine. A strong and independent Ukraine would be positive for the security of the entire continent, but whatever independence it had was taken away 10 years ago. We continue. Ukraine's fight for independent sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders directly contributes to Euro-Atlantic security. So they're reiterating themselves there, but it doesn't make it any more true. We welcome announcements by allies to provide Ukraine with critical additional air defense systems as well as other military capabilities to help Ukraine defend itself and deter Russian aggression in the future. We have, and then they go through a series of points. Point 1. Decided to establish the NATO security assistance and training for Ukraine to coordinate the provision of military equipment and training for Ukraine by allies and partners. Its aim is to place security assistance to Ukraine on an enduring footing, ensuring enhanced, predictable and coherent support. NSATU, which will operate in allied states, will support Ukraine's self-defense in line with the UN Charter. NSATU will not, under international law, make NATO a party to the conflict. Now, that's the best joke I've heard in years. It will support the transformation of Ukraine's defense and security forces, enabling its further integration with NATO. Well, that last bit at least is true. But again, all of this new body that they're setting up is essentially just renaming something that they're doing already. So they've already been coordinating training of Ukrainian armed forces for over 10 years now. They are all they've done is just decided to slap a new name on this operation and call it a new thing. It hasn't. And we all know NATO, well, the US is the major party to the conflict. So again, this is a rebranding, not anything new. And as for the additional air defense systems, well, there's no proof that I can see that the Patriot systems or the NASAM system is particularly good at shooting down Russian missiles, which is what the Russians are primarily using. They're not launching like a massive World War II style bombing raids over Ukrainian cities. They're using pinpoint strikes done by missiles. There's no evidence that the air defense systems given by the US and others to Ukraine is going to particularly assist with that. So they're also saying that they've announced a pledge of long-term security assistance for Ukraine for the provision of military equipment assistance and training. So we'll come to that in just a moment because it's an additional section. Through proportional contributions, allies intend to provide a minimum baseline funding of 40 billion within the next year and to provide sustainable levels of security assistance for Ukraine to prevail. Well, we'll come to what that really means in just a moment. Taken forward the establishment of NATO-Ukraine Joint Analysis, Training and Education Centre, JARTEC, an important pillar of practical cooperation to identify and apply lessons from Russia's war against Ukraine and increase Ukraine's interoperability with NATO. Again, an announcement of something that they're already doing. They're just giving it a new name. So again, meaningless. I mean, the NATO officers will be studying and trying to learn lessons from the war. They'll be doing that already. So again, they've just stuck a new name on something that's already happening. And the Secretary General, that's Stoltenberg, now soon to be replaced by Rutte, has appointed a senior representative in Ukraine. So again, a meaningless bureaucratic post. So what are these four things? They've given a new name to the training mission that they're doing with the Ukrainian forces. Training they've been doing with Ukrainian forces for 10 years. They've come up with a new pledge of security assistance. So let's go to that in just a moment. They say they're going to give 40 billion to Ukraine within the next year. Bear in mind, an awful lot of that will be orders for weapon systems given to companies in the United States and in Europe, mainly in the United States. That 40 billion isn't going to Ukraine. Some of it, the minimum that will go through Ukraine will be the minimum that's necessary to pay off various people and keep the lights on in the government ministries, just enough to prop up the Ukrainian government. And the rest of it, renaming something they're doing already and appointing a bureaucrat. Not exactly big stuff, is it? So let's go on to the pledge of long-term security assistance to Ukraine. This comes at the bottom of the page. So there's 6 points here, and I'll read through all of them. So point 1. This is their long-term security assistance pledge, by the way. Point 1. Today we affirm our unwavering commitment to Ukraine as a sovereign, democratic, independent state. Well, it's none of those things. So we're already in the territory of lies, as we've already said. To deliver that, Ukraine requires our long-term support. Since the start of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, well, lie, but we've said that many times, why that's a lie. Allies have provided unprecedented political, economic, military, financial and humanitarian support, including military assistance amounting to roughly 40 billion annually, much of which, as we've said, goes right back into the US and other countries again. Allies have also made their defence industrial capacity available to support Ukraine's needs and have revealed how woefully inadequate it is. All of this is having a substantial effect. It's getting a lot of Ukrainians killed, so yes, I guess that's true. Enabling Ukrainians to defend effectively and inflict real and severe costs on Russia. Real costs, yes, but not severe ones. Point 2. We reaffirm our determination to support Ukraine in building a force capable of defeating Russian aggression today and deterring it in the future. Okay, how are you going to do that then, guys? To that end, we intend to provide a minimum baseline funding of 40 billion euros within the next year, and to provide sustainable levels of security assistance for Ukraine to prevail, taking into account Ukraine's needs, our respective national budget procedures, and the bilateral security agreements which allies have concluded with Ukraine. Heads of state and government will re-evaluate allied contributions at future NATO summits, starting at the 2025 NATO summit in The Hague. Are you starting to see a theme emerging yet, which is a lot of flannel and not a lot else that they're not doing already. Point 3. Our commitment extends to costs related to provision of military equipment assistance and training for Ukraine, including purchase of military equipment for Ukraine, in-kind support donated to Ukraine, costs related to maintenance, logistics and transportation of military equipment for Ukraine, costs for military training for Ukraine, operational costs associated with the provision of military support to Ukraine, investments in and support for Ukraine's defence infrastructure and defence industry, all contributions to NATO trust funds for Ukraine, including non-lethal aid. Let's continue. Point 4. All allied support for Ukraine, according to the above criteria, would count whether delivered through NATO, bilateral, multilateral, or by any other means. To support fair burden sharing, allies will aim to meet this pledge through proportional contributions, including by taking into account their share of alliance GDP. Now, notice that, point 4, that is a get-out clause, basically, saying, well, we want to do this 40 billion euro package per year to Ukraine, and we're all committed to it, but there's a series of get-out clauses that people can hide behind, saying, well, we've already committed through our bilateral agreement with Ukraine to aid them by giving them, I don't know, 40 old chieftain tanks or something like that. We've pledged this much to multilateral institutions. We've given this much in aid, for instance. So what this is, I think, is a way for people like Orban or maybe Fico and others to say, well, we've already contributed to non-lethal aid. We've already contributed to humanitarian aid. We don't want to contribute weapon systems. So this is our way around it, basically. It's a get out for those who want to back out from providing the lethal aid, as they call it. Point 5. Allies will report to NATO on support delivered in relation to this pledge twice per year, with the first report to include contributions delivered after the 1st of January 2024. Based on this, the Secretary-General will provide an overview of all notified contributions to allies. Point 6. In addition to military support covered by this pledge, allies intend to continue providing political, economic, financial and humanitarian support to Ukraine. So point 6 is meaningless. Point 5, it just says that Mark Rutte is going to issue a report on the other points. Point 4 is a get-out clause for those who want to get out from providing more weapons to Ukraine. Point 3, again, is as a restatement of things they're doing already, and a statement of existing policy. Point 2, the 40 billion euro number is, of course, a big number, but again, a lot of that is going to go straight through Ukraine and back into the donor countries, particularly the United States. And as for all of this, again, this is essentially point 1 and point 2 are roughly the same. They've said the same thing basically twice. So point 1, we reaffirm our unwavering commitment to Ukraine. Point 2, we affirm our determination to support Ukraine. So essentially, point 1 and point 2 largely repeat each other. Point 3 just states what they've been doing anyway. There's nothing new in there. Point 4, get out clause. Point 5, we're going to write a report about this. Point 6, that's it. So this is meaningless. This is completely meaningless. So let's continue and look over another couple of things here. A lot of the rest of this is rhetoric. But point 16, I wanted to read this to you. We fully support Ukraine's right to choose its own security arrangement and decide its own future free from outside interference. Well, that's a manifest and enormous lie, isn't it? I mean, the fact that Yanukovych 10 years ago tried to assert Ukraine's right to choose its own security and economic arrangements caused the US and others to unleash the coup upon Ukraine, which brought them to this point, which has destroyed the Ukrainian nation and was causing huge numbers of Ukrainians to flee the country to Russia and Europe before the Russian special military operation began in 2022. So this is an obvious and transparent lie. The reason why we're here at all is because of external interference in Ukrainian affairs from the United States and others. But then it says, we fully support Ukraine's right to choose its own security arrangements. Ukraine's future is in NATO. So it doesn't have that right then. Basically, it states something and then says, but your future is in us. I mean, presumably as being digested by them. Ukraine has become increasingly interoperable and politically integrated with the alliance. We welcome the concrete progress Ukraine has made since the Vilnius summit on its required democratic, economic and security reforms. Well, that's all meaningless drivel. I mean, the US threw out its objection to Ukraine joining the NATO alliance this time was that it was too corrupt. I mean, what democratic progress have they made? Zelensky cancelled the elections. He's ruling by decree and martial law. Economic, well, it doesn't have much of an economy anymore other than what the masters in Washington decide to give it. Security, well, have you seen what's happening on the Ukrainian streets? You've got armed resistance against the press gangs. You've got the press gangs and others murdering people. You have press gang members being shot at and killed sometimes in return. What security progress have they made in the last year? None. Basically, it's just another meaningless phrase. So, as Ukraine continues this vital work, we will continue to support its irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. So again, they confirm that the first sentence is a lie, because it's not free to choose its own security arrangements. They've just said it's not. It's on an irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership, which is, by the way, that's also a lie. But never mind about that. We'll come to that in a minute. So Ukraine isn't free to choose its own path then. We reaffirm, they said, that we will be in a position to extend an invitation to Ukraine to join the alliance when allies agree and conditions are met. So never, basically. They're going to be on the path to joining forever. Like Turkey's on the path to joining the EU forever. The summit decisions by NATO and the NATO-Ukraine Council, combined with allies' ongoing work, constitute a bridge to Ukraine's membership in NATO. Allies will continue to support Ukraine's progress on interoperability, as well as additional democratic and security sector reforms, which NATO foreign ministers will continue to assess through the adapted annual national programme. So, what all this means in human language is that basically Ukraine is going to be, as I said, told it's joining NATO, endlessly told it's joining NATO, endlessly this phrase will be thrown at Zelensky and Yermak and Podolyak and others You're on a path to full Euro-Atlantic integration. You're on a path to NATO membership. Your future is the Euro-Atlantic future. Your future is full integration with the Euro-Atlantic area. Of course, this will just keep being said. You saw just a minute ago what their amazing new pledges of long-term security assistance amount to. They amount to absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. And then 40 billion euros, well, there's a reason why that's given in euros, and that's because basically the US has decided that we're going to dump as much of this as possible on the Europeans and slowly back away from this situation. That's the reality. There's nothing new. There's no great new pledge of security and assistance. There's no path to NATO membership there, and there never was going to be either. Only another manipulation that Zelensky can lean on, though him and Yermak must know that this means you're never joining, that you're never getting in. You're on the path, but that path leads over the edge of a cliff. Now, a couple of other things that were funny from this statement. They call upon the Russians to withdraw from Moldova and Georgia. Ironically enough, Georgia is looking to open up negotiations with the Russian government to end the after effects of the war of 2008, started by Saakashvili, and the troops that are on the territory of the Transnistrian Republic. They were there as part of a long-term settlement going all the way back to the final days of the Soviet Union. So they are there by agreement. Maya Sandu might have turned around and said, well, I don't recognize it anymore, but there is an agreement by which they are there. And if the NATO forces think they can be removed from there, they've probably got another thing coming. So again, like, they're losing Georgia now. Even the Georgian ruling class have decided that this is a piece of action that they very much don't want to be part of. The Moldovan puppet is seemingly made of more malleable stuff, though. So they then say that Russia seeks to fundamentally reconfigure Euro-Atlantic security architecture. Well, this is actually true. They do seek to reconfigure it. They've sought to renegotiate it for over 30 years. But if the Euro-Atlantic security architecture is so amazing, and as they kept saying that NATO's kept the peace for 35 years or whatever it was, but well, the security architecture led you to, by your own admission, the most widespread war in Europe since 1945. So if that's the case, that this alliance is so amazing and the Euro-Atlantic security architecture is so good, why did it lead you to a point where you're engaged, as you know, you keep denying you are, but you obviously are, in terms of the NATO countries, engaged in the biggest war since 1945, a war that you and your proxy forces are losing? So why shouldn't the Russians seek to reconfigure it, given that that's what was committed to 30 years ago? But as Michael McFaul says, we lie. That's diplomacy. We lie. So why shouldn't it be reconfigured? Here's the question to ask people. If the security architecture that exists right now led us to the biggest war in Europe since 1945, almost 80 years ago, then why not reconfigure it? Then why not have a new deal that takes in all of Europe, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, all countries all the way through to the border of China? Why not do that? Well, there's a rather obvious answer to that, isn't it? Because the security architecture has been designed by US imperialism. That's why. The security architecture has been designed to suit the needs of US imperialism, to continue dominating Europe, to make sure that Europe remains under the thumb, which it's been quite successful at so far, and to make sure that the US still gets to press its claim for full spectrum dominance. So the security architecture is quite plainly garbage, almost by their own admission. So here's some more lies, though. Russia is rebuilding and expanding its military capabilities and continues its airspace violations and provocative activities. By the way, the airspace violations and provocative activities, that's all NATO countries doing that. And they've been doing it for years. They were doing it before the special military operation began. We stand in solidarity with all allies affected by these actions. NATO does not seek confrontation and poses no threat to Russia. Lie. Complete lie. I mean, how anybody still believes that, I'm not sure. We remain willing to maintain channels of communication with Moscow to mitigate risk and prevent escalation. Now, the point about this is that, of course, the confrontation was sought straight away. And the confrontation was sought straight away, and we know it was because we can see the quotes from the Wolfowitz Memorandum of 1992 that, again, was leaked to the New York Times by Wolfowitz himself 32 years ago, stating that no powerful country should be allowed to emerge on the territory of the former Soviet Union. And we know from the actions taken by the CIA and MI6 all the way through the 90s that they were seeking to leverage whatever ethnic conflict or religious conflict that they could inside Russia to break the country up. We know from the testimony now of Putin that the US actually wanted to not only get rid of Russia's nuclear weapons built up during the socialist period, but also to rob it of its nuclear power stations. They wanted a disarmed Russia. What would be acceptable to them would have been a Russia that was disarmed of its nuclear weapons, had its nuclear power stations closed down, was completely dependent upon the West for spare parts for its oil and gas facilities, and was just simply there with its army to do one thing and one thing only: internal repression. They wanted Russia, if it was allowed to continue existing, it would be nothing more than a semi-colony of mainly US imperialism. That's the plan they had for it. So this idea that, we're no threat to Russia, I mean, this is just a transparent lie. If you believe that, you have probably had an involuntary lobotomy performed on you. They then condemn Russia's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric, but of course, it's the nuclear game being escalated is always being escalated, of course, by the United States. The Russians, and again, you can find this even in Western sources, state over and over and over again, going back over 20 years, that they want to negotiate with the US about arms control. The US says no. The US tears up more agreements and tells Russia to fuck off. So they've been escalating the nuclear game for over 20 years and then keep saying, we're no threat to anybody, we're no threat to anybody. But again, that's an obvious lie. If you're no threat to anybody, then why do you keep cancelling all the nuclear weapons treaties? If you have no hostile intent towards Russia, then why were you looking to place short to medium range missiles on the territory of Ukraine? Why were you looking to bring Ukraine into NATO in the first place? If there's no hostile intent towards Russia, what possible value does Ukraine have other than as a place to conduct hostile actions towards Russia? There's no escaping the reality of the enormity of these lies. I mean, there's again, it's written down as a plan from 1992 onwards to make sure that Russia never emerges again as a rival, as a potential threat to US power. And again, you can then track when does the coverage of Putin swing from glowing, in which it initially was in the West, to hostile. It's when he shuts down a pro-US coup operation run by Khodorkovsky, and it makes it clear that he's not going to allow the country to be disarmed, and he's not going to allow the country to be dismembered. I mean, it's not just him, of course. There's a whole range of forces, and prominent amongst them the KPRF, that are responsible for that position. But you can really just track when the West turns on him and gets increasingly hysterical about the Putin system. And it's all because of the fact that he, for one reason or another, hasn't gone along with that game. So this idea that it's the Russians amping up the rhetoric and they're irresponsible and all that, pure projection. They've been playing this game for, as I said, for 30 years. And you don't need to go too far to find the reasons for that. So rest of it is just meaningless drivel. Denouncing Belarus, denouncing the DPRK, denouncing Iran, denouncing China, threats to, of course, move NATO into the South China Sea, see how well that goes. And the rest of it's just empty rhetoric and bloviating, basically. So I'll just shut that down right there. So the whole statement is just a giant exercise in veiled confessions, but mainly it's an exercise when it comes to Ukraine in saying absolutely nothing at all. Like the US is quite obviously transferring responsibility for this mess onto the Europeans now. That's not just Trump's policy, that's the policy of the US administration. We'll find 40 billion euros a year. Yeah, there's a reason why that's not given in dollars, because it's going to be dumped on the Europeans. They're going to be told to do it, and they'll have to suck it up and accept it, because the new administration, and it's looking pretty damn clear that it's going to be a Donald Trump administration, barring accident or injury to the man himself, because Biden is sinking quicker than an unwanted New York gangster in the Hudson River. So this is a transparent attempt to palm responsibility for the Ukraine project off. It offers Zelensky nothing. I mean, I saw a video of Tony Blinken babbling on about the fact that Ukraine's getting F-16s. It's getting like a few. And again, the F-16 or any fighter plane or any bomber, it only works as part of a whole system, an integrated system of support with regard to other aircraft, with regard to ground air defense, with regard to its integration into a wider military system. Just giving them a few F-16s with some poorly trained Ukrainian pilots flying them, all that's going to do is get them shot down. It's designed to generate a headline, and that's it. Before we got to this summit, I made a prediction. I'm not claiming to be a great mystic, but I have studied this bureaucracy long enough to know what it does, and said what I said they'd do is come up with a series of very impressive sounding words which ultimately delivered nothing. And what they've done is come out with a load of blather that delivers nothing. I mean, Zelensky's got nothing that he didn't have yesterday or the day before. So this summit has been a giant exercise in papering over the cracks, which leads me back to Orban's mission to Moscow and to Kiev and to Beijing. That's clearly a sign of what is actually going on. What's actually going on is that Orban is leading as the only visible representative, but there'll be others from Europe and the United States administration, or the permanent state, should we say, who have decided to start the process of getting out of this thing. That's what's actually going on. There's going to be a lot of talk and a lot of screaming and a lot of temper tantrums between now and when it eventually ends. But it's clear that Orban has established some kind of dialogue. And Biden is fucked. So the fact that he goes to meet Trump is just a sign of where power is flowing to. Biden's fucked, even if the Democrats use the 25th Amendment on the guy and, or put some, speed in his cornflakes or something and decide to off him. They can't win. They're done. They're screwed. Trump's going to win. And I will predict this, that a section of the US ruling class that might have had a problem with Trump 4 years ago doesn't have a problem with him now, or not as much of a problem. For some of them, some of the perhaps more intelligent members of the ruling class and their strategists, they've had a long look at this and thought, we can't win this thing. This hasn't worked. We can't admit that we haven't won it. We want to keep it going for as long as we can to cost the Russians and to get to make sure that this is wound down in a way that is acceptable to us. But we can't win it. So let Trump come in for a variety of reasons. He's well on board with all the hostility towards China, so there's no problem with regard to getting him on board with that. He's going to bring back in people like Mike Pompeo, by the way, who's now rebranded as a national conservative, whatever that means. Basically the same bullshit beliefs he had before. So he's going to fill his cabinet full of swamp creatures, but rebranded swamp creatures now. But the swamp creatures will decide ultimately that we best just bail on this thing. And so it's a matter of deciding how the balloon goes down. Is it going to be popped or is it going to be slowly deflated? And this is Orban's job. And it's a job that's been given to him not just by Trump, but by various people inside Europe too. So what we can expect is, in terms of the next few months, the war will continue, of course, and the horrors committed there will continue. Many, many thousands more Ukrainians will die. And of course, there'll be the usual hysterics and rhetoric coming out of Europe. But fundamentally, the decision has been made to let the air out of this thing. And this is what this summit shows. They've got nothing. And the reason why they're going to have to let the air out of the tires here is because they've got nothing. There's nothing they can do. There's no threat that they can make. There's no force that they can deploy that could stand even a cat in hell's chance of winning. It's over. It's over, and the only reason it's not white flag up the pole a time is because the US and, US in particular, US imperialism is desperate to save face on this thing. And so hence the announcements, 40 billion euros, we're there for the long haul. It's why you get Keir Starmer and that prick John Healey, our defense secretary, grinning away with Zelensky. But really, even Zelensky must know by now that this is over, that he's been abandoned, that basically his only chance of physical survival is to continue following his orders, which means sacrificing thousands upon thousands of more Ukrainians to die horrifically on the Eastern Front. And this is the grisly reality. This NATO summit was a meeting of a ghoulish crime cartel, which is what it is. It is an assemblage of the worst criminals in the world, an assemblage of the biggest collection of mass murderers representing mass murdering governments that the world has ever seen. A assemblage of people who have sacrificed 400,000, 500,000, 600,000, however many it is, Ukrainian lives for the purposes of, trying to destroy Russia and thus securing their own position in the world for another few years by being able to loot it. But these are people who have delivered an absolute horror. These are criminals of the worst kind. And if there is a revolution one day in any of the major European countries or any of the European countries or Ukraine itself, then all of these people should be packed up to face trial for crimes against humanity going back over a decade, just for what's happened in Ukraine. And we haven't even started to talk about Gaza, because they should all be in the dock for that one, including Trump, by the way. So we are going to pause here to take some questions and comments from the floor, so to speak. Right, okay. So before we go any further, though, I will just take this opportunity to plug the Telegram channel. We have a very active chat over there. So if you're not on Telegram, do try and get yourselves onto it if you possibly can, and join us over on the Telegram chat. It's where I'm splitting like posting and updates between there and Twitter at the moment. I'm finding that I seem to be getting a lot more interaction on Twitter these days since I started slagging off Keir Starmer more. So I'll be doing more of that. But join the Telegram group, join the discussion forums. There's always a lot of interesting things under discussion there. So Grassy Knoll is with us, joins us from Seattle, Washington. Jane is with us and says that she set her alarm. Well, good to have you with us. Two Sugars joins us, as does Loam Bart, as does Otis. Muzzle Paint, good afternoon to you. When's the Biden press conference? That's going to be fun, as Muzzle Paint observes. Nikki Const is with us and says hello. I say hello back to you. Robeson joins us from Jakarta. Ben joins us from Pech, Southwest Hungary. Good to have you with us, Ben. Austin joins us. It says, congratulations to English football fans. Hope Spain wins, though. Hope for a good game overall. Spain will win. I don't think there's much doubt about that. They're a much better side. Even though, I watched the game last night. The England team played its best football probably for for years. I mean, for as long as I can remember, they had a very good first half and a solid second half. They probably deserve to win overall. That's about as good as it's going to get, though. The Spanish will probably win quite easily. Ben says, last time we had Zelensky the gardener, picture from the Vilnius summit. Now we have Zelensky, Yoon, and Kishida on the White House balcony. The puppets hang out, and literally hung out to dry in some cases. Svetlana, comradely greetings to you. Bernardo Bender says good morning from the other end of the world. Eric joins us from North Carolina. Kevin joins us from Sligo. Good evening to you, comrade. Albert joins us, and I say good evening to you. Tim joins us, and he's busy reading Kieran and Kenny's Socialism Betrayed, an excellent book. If you haven't read it, be sure to do so. It was my introduction to real Marxist-Leninist analysis of the fall of the USSR. Jawad, good evening to you out there in Dorset, comrade. And Ben says, the whole NATO PR operation is to enlist, deputize European allies in the struggles in Eurasia and including the Pacific, a ploy to show we're not alone. Yeah, I look forward to the Lithuanian Expeditionary Force showing up in Taiwan. Sure they don't know. Do I support a Premier League football team? Asks Austin. No, I don't, Austin. I support a team that used to be in the Premier League and was relegated around about 22 years ago. I'll leave you to work out who that is. If you can guess who it is, you win a prize. I'm not sure what that will be. Ben is correct. It's an admission of absolute US weakness. Tobias joins us. Good evening to you. Peter joins us from Perfidious Albion. Sid joins us from Cincinnati, where it's a hot afternoon, apparently. David joins us from West Yorkshire. Good evening to you. Svetlana is enjoying the music. Glad that you are. Ben was joining the East. The sun in the East is red. Apparently John Cena uses that in his intros. Is that why there's like pictures of John Cena in a Mao jacket going around? Rev Ripple, I will consider remixing the tunes. We're very heavy on the Eastern tunes at the moment. May vary it up. I don't know. It depends if I've got time to do a new playlist. Ben spotted the it was Red Blacksmiths was the title I got it under, the Hungarian song. Marrow Mind joins us and is glad to catch another stream. Zauta joins us and says, greetings from me, that's you, Tom in West Yorkshire. Hello to you. Luca joins us, catching the live stream on the way home. And we've got Bolshevik joins us from Tucson, Arizona. Temperature at 11:30 a.m., 105 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees centigrade. I think I'm saying all that correctly. Josh, hello to you, comrade. Greetings to Irish Partisan, who joins us from a balmy evening in Minsk. Paul Mason joins us. He's holding the fort in London while Keir's away. Last time I saw Paul Mason, he was blind drunk, staggering around the streets of London, trying to do a sort of TikTok political analysis. I hope he does another one. Well, next to Keir Starmer, maybe Biden is mentally agile. I'm not sure. To responding to Ben's comment there. Jenny, good afternoon to you. Working Prole Incorporated says Nazi summit, and Working Prole is correct. Sasha Dumka, guten Abend to you. Wie geht's, Kameraden? Jeremy says good afternoon to all, and I say good afternoon back. Robeson says, do you have any analysis on the indigenous class, i.e. Native Americans, Aborigines? What's to be done about them? Well, I would say that the idea of separate indigenous struggles in these places like the United States and Australia, New Zealand, etc. Maybe New Zealand is a little bit different. I'm not sure, but I know more about the Australian situation and the United States. The best way for justice to be had for those who have been dispossessed is for them to join in a combined struggle with the proletariat to overthrow American imperialism, to overthrow the American monopoly capitalist class. Same is true in Australia. Then, of course, we can talk about things like securing access to historic land, respect for traditions and language, etc., so that can be preserved in the way that a lot of socialist countries have preserved indigenous cultures. That should be certainly done, and there should be respect for the indigenous American and Australian Aboriginal culture, religion, language, etc. But this idea that it's a separate struggle apart from the rest of the proletariat is just simply unproductive and an ultra-left pipe dream. We can reach a point, and after the revolution, some of the historic wrongs done to the indigenous peoples can be addressed in the ways I suggested before. But the idea that it's a separate struggle to be waged on its own, that's ultra-leftism and opportunism. We have Comrades from the Revolution Report joining us. We have Nikolai joining us and says 2014, Q in Ukraine, very true. Brad joins us. Mogridge says, did Sir No Idea Kier get a ride in Mrs. Zelensky's new Bugatti? Probably a bit too racy for his blandness. Well, I don't think she lets anybody drive that thing. I wonder where it's parked. Maybe in their villa in Florida. Yes, Ben is right. Russia does have free reign over all of Ukraine in the air. All of these air defense systems haven't worked. And again, the militaries of the West know that. Eric makes an interesting point and says, sounds like they're planning to set up an off-the-books military aid coordination department through which they plan to wash the dark money they plan to support the coming post-war insurgency through. Now, that is a good point. I mean, their plan has been for a long time that as soon as this is over, that they will fund an unending insurgency. So I think Eric's point there is a good one. That's a thing to explore in the future. Their plan is to sustain the war beyond the conventional. So sustain it into a terrorist insurgency campaign against whatever comes out of this. So the plan is also, I think, to withdraw their participation slowly. I do wonder if the plan is either just to let it fall piece by piece and then force the Russians to take management over the whole thing, and then run a terrorist insurgency campaign across it. I wonder if that's not the plan. To basically let the air out of the tires and don't do anything to escalate it, but then turn it into a terrorist campaign when you've forced the Russians to basically occupy the entirety of what was Ukraine. That might be the plan. That does sound cynical enough for them to do. Nikolai says, it sounds like new arms race equals poor people get poorer. Fair point. Sea of Kronos says it must take forever to sign NATO confetti. Hadn't considered that. Carolus Maximus, good evening to you. Ben says, sending Tomahawk cruise missiles, not hypersonics, despite media claims, with 2,500 kilometer range to Germany by 2026 is the only really desperate and dangerous move. Yeah, and I mean, they've had similar things there before. We'll see if that comes to pass, though. Sid says, NATO and the Western press take their cue directly from Mein Kampf because most people would never consider such a lie as the complete reversal of facts even possible, the kind of lies Hitler advocated. Well, they're the kind of lies that imperialism necessitates, Sid. If you're robbing half the world and want to tell everybody that it's for the purposes of civilization or civilizing them whilst you're killing large numbers of them, you have to have some pretty big lies. Hitler didn't invent that. He just adapted it for the conditions of Germany at the time. Ian Foster, good evening to you. Davy Capel, good evening to you. Ben's right. There's no hard commitments in the text whatsoever. And Ben says, Ukrainian doctors are now offering a leg breaking service to get out of the draft. They'll probably end up getting drafted even with broken legs. Yeah, if Zelensky's read this agreement, to jump off what Ben said, he's got to know how fucked he is now. But he probably does. The only reason he's sticking with it is because if he doesn't, then they will abandon him, and then he's dead. His only choice now, well, he's got two choices. He could surrender, and then the Azov gang or his own bodyguards would kill him, or he follows his orders to the last and hopes to get out and quit and get extracted to Florida, basically. Sid says, with reference to Vietnam, people went to Canada if they could, or they refused to fight once they got to Vietnam. Squads would go out on patrol and would sit down once beyond the view of the commanding officers. Yeah, hence why they believed, the US High Command believed that the US Army was falling to pieces. And it was falling to pieces by the early 1970s. Very surprised, says Rev Ripple, Georgia is taking the sane route. It's absolutely crawling with Western spooks and development types. Well, it is, but, I mean, Georgian Dream's not particularly a revolutionary party or anything, but the fact that they got elected and have refused to join this and have stayed pretty steadfast in it says that although the regime change gang do have a lot of numbers and do make a lot of noise, they're not as powerful as we thought, in that their support pretty much topped out a few years ago. And the more that things go badly wrong in Ukraine, the less support these people are going to get. And that's becoming more and more obvious now. Tom Joe, good evening to you. Yes, Ben is right. Ukraine signed a defense agreement with Luxembourg and Romania. Maybe all 900 Luxembourgeois soldiers will be marching to Kiev. We've got Zargo5, who joins us. Svetlana says, Russia has thousands of agents all throughout Europe pretending to be Ukrainian refugees since 2022. Smart move. Because, of course, most Europeans won't be able to tell the difference at all. Besides espionage, their task, if required, is to disrupt and destroy NATO arms bases. Sensible move by the Russians. I mean, they would probably have had a lot of people in Ukraine anyway. I mean, joining the wave of refugees and pretending to be Ukrainians is a smart move. The West has probably opened its doors to an awful lot of people who can run sabotage missions on them. Despite all this, a clear-cut 1/3 of nuclear reactors currently under construction or planned are by Rosatom. Is that globally, Ben? That's interesting. Yeah, well, Rosatom's become a very big business, very big state-owned enterprise for the Russians, all built, of course, on the incredible developments under socialism. But yeah, why would the Russians give that up? The only reason you give up your nuclear power facilities is if you wanted to make yourself into a useless, pathetic comprador, like Pashinyan does. Lertis, good evening to you, who are just up the road from me at the height of the British summer, which is, of course, a joke. We are in the middle of the finest example of British summer, which is it is damp and rather soggy. Eric says, the talk about Russia being nothing but a gas station masquerading as a country was less a description than a Christmas wish by the collective West. Yeah, that's true. That was, again, a lot of what the Westerners say is projection or attempts at wish fulfillment. And so that's what the John McCain comment really was, wish fulfillment, or an expression of a wish. Shanish, good evening to you. Zarg says, Sean Penn may be a good actor, but doesn't know shit about politics. Knows an awful lot about shared habits with Zelensky, though. Ben asks, did I catch the Saudi veiled threat about divesting from Europe if it seizes Russian sovereign assets? Yeah, I mean, the Saudis don't want that precedent to be set because they're always worried that they could be next. And Whether the threat to divest from Europe will be enough, I don't know. It's probably a big part of the reason why they've been unwilling to just go out and seize the assets. I mean, the Europeans can be beaten up on by the Saudis. The Americans can't. So Biden, or whoever's running things in there, can say that just go and get it, man. Just go and get the goddamn money. But with little fear that the Saudis are going to fuck with him too much openly. The Saudis can beat up the Europeans, though. That's for certain. Orban on his way to meet with Trump. That's funny. What does Gary Busey have to say about nuclear weapons? Well, he was in Under Siege, where I believe, wasn't the plot of Under Siege that Tommy Lee Jones was leading a group of disgruntled CIA agents to steal a battleship that had, was it nuclear-capable cruise missiles on it? So maybe Gary Busey does know something about it. He was working with Tommy Lee Jones to try and attack the United States, but he was thwarted by Steven Seagal. Yes, well, I mean, Ben makes a comment about Pashinyan. I mean, the fate of Armenia is a terrible warning to my mind about two things. First of all, rule by corrupt and weak oligarchic governments is zero good whatsoever, that become very unpopular and are unable to mobilize any of the masses in their defense when a Pashinyan character and a color revolution operation is rolled out in their country. And also, never underestimate the fact that someone like Pashinyan and whoever is, aiding him will drive the whole country into a ditch and then we'll just walk away. He'll get to go into exile somewhere. I mean, this is the thing that frustrates me to a degree about people who still haven't seen this yet. Look, there's a series of bad things that any country can go through. But one of the things that more people in the East, I will say, need to learn, and we might need to learn it before too long. In fact, we probably should. One of the lessons that needs to be learned is that when it comes to comprador regimes, there's no limits to them. There's no limit to them. If you think for a moment that Pashinyan or Zelensky values Armenia or Ukraine more than they value their own neck or their own bank account, then you're very much mistaken. As I said, these people will destroy the countries that they are nominally in charge of if they are ordered to do so firmly enough by the US. Zelensky's achieved that. Poroshenko would have as well. Pashinyan is achieving that in Armenia because this is the task set for him by his masters. So it's hard for some people to get their heads around the idea that there are characters out there who will just destroy the whole country upon the command of a foreign power. And the other thing to bear in mind is that it seems to me that when it comes to certain exile communities, that the influence of these people is terrible these days. Used to be that like exiles in the United States from Germany and Russia were like centers of socialism, communism, even anarchism back in the day before it became too annoying. These days, I mean, the petty bourgeois exile community, diaspora community, seems in the Armenian case to be unbelievably reactionary and just very willing to push the country of their ancestors into a ditch to pursue some agenda that they presumably got pushed into their minds by the State Department. So Pashinyan, a disaster. It's only going to be a matter of time now before Aliyev decides to take the plunge and take the corridor that links up Azerbaijan proper to Nakhchivan. And to get that, he needs, and Erdogan needs, a deal with the Iranians and the Russians too. And Pashinyan is making sure that he alienates the Russians, so he's doing that job. With regards to Iran, the election of Pezeshkian might be an indication that they could get this deal. I mean, there's a story that Pezeshkian wants closer ties with the Turks, and he's actually from the Iranian part of Azerbaijan himself originally. So, with Pezeshkian in the presidency, even though foreign policy is very much the purview of the supreme leader in Iran, but the president has an influence, undoubtedly. Aliyev will be making overtures to try and get this land bridge sorted. So far, the Iranians have objected to having their connection with Armenia severed. How long will that objection remain? Aliyev is engaged in the business of seizing bits of land all the way up and down what remains of the border. At what point do him and Erdogan decide that they can risk some kind of takeover of the border area and link up Nakhchivan with Azerbaijan proper? Because all the overtures that Aliyev is making to Moscow, which he has been making them, and now he's making them to Pezeshkian, seems to indicate that they think that they can get something there. Now, the Iranians will have, of course, concerns about the presence of the Israelis in Azerbaijan, and there was rumors the other day that an Israeli hit squad was identified trying to get in over the Azeri border and was eliminated. So there'll be blockages there. It may be that to get this, Aliyev will have to step away from the flaming dumpster fire that is Israel, but maybe he's thinking he's got enough out of that relationship now so he can let it go. Things are in flux, and for the Armenians to stand a chance of retaining their sovereignty and their border as it stands, they would need to get rid of Pashinyan, and they would need to purge the country of foreign influence. Doesn't look like they're going to do it. I mean, there was that big movement led by the priest recently, who seemed a very charismatic figure, but it doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere. Because fundamentally, you come into a point where if Pashinyan won't step down, then you need to escalate to the next level. And that means going directly up against the forces of the state, which although Pashinyan has pulled the teeth of the army, he's got an armed police force there that he will not hesitate to unleash if he is threatened. So are the Armenians, are there forces in Armenia capable of escalating that struggle? I don't know at the moment. I need to do more research on it. But if they don't, then eventually Aliyev is going to get his deal, particularly if he's prepared to go in and make certain concessions to the Russians, which he will do to get the prize, and that Erdogan is prepared to make certain concessions to the Russians, particularly with regard to Syria. If Erdogan can get the land bridge sorted that runs all the way, that enables the Turks to run all the way through Nakhchivan, all the way over to Azerbaijan proper, then that's a big win for him and his sort of bizarre pan-Turkic expansion dreams. And if they can get a deal with the Iranians, even better. So that might necessitate horse trading on Erdogan's part, whereby he's prepared to barter away his occupation of Syria, or from bits of northern Syria, and reach an agreement with Assad to essentially withdraw from there, compromise the American position there, and have them driven out. In return, he gets the cherished land corridor to reunify Azerbaijan, or unify Azerbaijan, and presumably, or he would hope, begin an integration process into his sort of pan-Turkic community. So a lot of games being played. And if I were Armenian right now, I'd be thinking, well, how the hell do we get this guy out? And not just him, but like the whole power structure related to him and the gigantic US embassy which sits behind him. Because there's the future. A dismembered rump of a country surrounded by an Azerbaijan, which is essentially being run by Erdogan. Sid says Mike Pompeo, along with Matt Pottinger and Mike Gallagher, want war with China and a $1.4 trillion annual military budget. Well, good luck with that, considering they can't even get their supply chains freed from China. So good luck, Finn Mike. Maybe John Bolton will come back. Who knows? President Jesus says the dam is broken on Biden. CNN is reporting that his meetings with cabinet secretaries are scripted in advance. The entire display is kind of an act, one of the sources said. Well, we knew that. Thinking back with regard to Biden, I mean, let's go back to 2021, if you can remember that. We could see that Biden had mentally slipped a step or 10 then. And he was being given cue cards when he was doing those COVID briefings, if you remember, in his first year. So, yes, I'm not surprised that everything's scripted in advance, but that means it's been scripted for years. CNN will have known about it for years because all the press conferences he's done, the very few that he's done, remember Trump did one every week, they are all scripted in advance. Everybody knew this. Like Julian Castro said, did you just forget what you said a minute ago? Back in 2019. So this has all been known. I mean, the laughable thing is that they're pretending it's a revelation that he fell apart in that debate. And the thing is, they would have known that he would fall apart in that debate. They must have known. And Trump's tactic was to just let him do it and not say very much. So, like, CNN is now breaking the news, which leads me to think that the ruling class has accepted Trump. Now, he's not much of a threat anymore. His movement is largely just turned into a personality cult dedicated to him. He'll go around saying some rude things. Who the VP for Trump is going to be is he going to be an interesting choice. I think Dog Killer Gnome is probably out of the picture. But what is it going to be? Fat Mike Pompeo? He'll always be Fat Mike. Tim Scott? Probably not. Probably not Ron DeSantis. He'll not want it. Well, maybe, but Trump probably won't give it to him. Haley, probably not. So it's going to be interesting to see who it is. I don't know who the front runner for that is at the moment, because I've got a feeling that the VP, whoever it is, will be the one that actually is going to be making a lot of the decisions. Trump will be, as he said previously, making America great. VP will be doing a lot of running of things. So they'll need somebody who's competent enough at actually running meetings. It's the reason why part of the reason why Pence was in there. Pence is an asshole of epic proportions, but he's a former, I think he's a former congressman. Was he a former governor? So he has a certain amount of experience, like running meetings, doing the bureaucratic stuff. So whoever the VP is going to be is going to have to be somebody who can do the bureaucratic stuff, because Trump's not interested in doing it. So whoever the VP is will be the one that's running the administration. The thing with this administration is that the president can't run it, and the VP can't run it either. So yes, open season on Biden. At this point, I think, as I said, the American ruling class, or a big section of it, has decided it doesn't matter if Trump gets in. So let Biden go down with the ship and let Ukraine be blamed on him. When this Ukraine mess is over, will Europe get the customary refugee flows? It's already had them. I mean, I think everybody who wanted to leave Ukraine has left already. When the war's over, some may even return, because life in Europe's not going to get much better for them. And if the Russians take over the majority of the country, then the Russians will regenerate it, and you might actually see some people go on a refugee flow in the other direction. The way things are going in this country, I might be one of them. That's why my Russian learning needs to improve quickly. China has blasted the NATO communique, by the way, as provocations and lies. Well, accurate statement, but as Ben says, finally, yes, the Chinese have been slowly becoming less and less diplomatic. I mean, you read a Chinese statement, I mean, you get lost in a sort of maze sometimes. I mean, their meaning is there if you know what to look for, but just to read the China section, I mean, this was point 4 of the NATO communique, where they were just slagging off other countries. They said about China, the People's Republic of China stated ambitions and coercive policies continue to challenge our interests, security, and values. Interests is the only true statement there. It's the only truth in that sentence. The deepening of strategic partnership between Russia and the PRC and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut and reshape the rules-based international order are a cause for profound concern. We are confronted by hybrid cyberspace and other threats and malicious activities from state and non-state actors. Well, most of the malicious activities are from the NATO countries. But again, why shouldn't the Russians and the Chinese tear up this order? Most of the world would support them in doing so. So again, that's what China's probably reacted to. Good evening to Lee Williams, who joins us. Irish partisan. Poland has been roped into creating a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine by placing its Patriots on the Polish-Ukraine border in a bid to protect F-16s when operating over Ukrainian airspace. Well, I doubt that's going to work very well. And again, whether that even materializes. Because the Russians aren't deploying their aircraft in Western Ukraine either. They're deploying missiles. And again, the Patriot systems have proven very ineffectual at shooting down Russian missiles. So all that's going to happen is that they're going to end up, firing off a lot of missiles and not hitting anything? Yeah, I think this is another announcement that was designed to make the NATO conference look good. When it comes down to practicalities, what these things are going to do is that they're going to fly them around for a bit. They're all going to get shot down. Then Zelensky's going to go, I think he said it the other day. He said he needs over 100 aircraft, which actually isn't an unreasonable demand given the condition of the Ukrainian forces. But he's not going to get 100 of them. He's going to get about 20. So again, this is like chest-beating nonsense because they can't shoot down those Russian missiles. And the Russian aircraft, if they try and shoot down Russian aircraft, that's a serious escalation that will lead to the Russians attacking Poland. Duda is a moron and a mouth-breathing asshole, but I don't think he's that stupid. Tusk is a cynic and a scumbag, but again, don't think he's that stupid. And the Polish generals might, again, bang on the table and say we're ready for war, but the Polish army is basically limited these days to apparently executing attempted Ukrainian deserters in the field. The Poles without the Americans can't do shit. And if the Americans won't back them up, nothing will come of any of this. Albert, it's not Fulham. Marrow, it's not Charlton Athletic. Yeah, so keep on guessing, lads. Not Oldham either, mate. It ain't Derby, Lurtis. No, I don't support Blackburn either, Almere. You guys are going to have to get better at this. Bear in mind, I'm from the furthest northern part of a county called Derbyshire. So focus on that. Focus on where that is. Comrade John Cena, says Jenny. No, it's not Preston North End either. Preston North End haven't been in the Premier League, Tom. It's not Aki Stanley, Arnold, though I have been to see them a few times. Peter says, Penn is mouthing the fetishistic disavowal of the US ruling class. This affirms one fetishized belief, e.g. US omnipotence, but disavows real truths. Russia could wipe it out militarily. Yeah, and Penn is, well, I would say that Sean Penn is a model for he should be a model for the benefits of psychoanalysis, meaning that a psychoanalyst would have a field day with him. Can you imagine the horrible things that would be unearthed from that man's mind? Apparently Midwestern Marks are playing a funny version of the Internationale in a folk style. Okay, that's strange. Bradford, no, not Bradford either. Not Portsmouth either. David Greenwood hates Starmer. Everybody hates Starmer. Nobody likes Starmer. I hate Wes Streeting just as much. Well, nobody likes him either. No, it's not the Manchester area. It's the other side. Yep X says, do you know any worthwhile debates on socialism, communism, Marxism where the capitalist loses? Do you mean like online debates or like points of debate? Yep X, can you clarify? Blair is back, apparently. Well, Blair never went away. I mean, Blair's been, as a representative of the British ruling class, he's been an influence on every single government since he stepped down because, again, like Obama, he conveys messages from the ruling class. That's why he's an influence. Zain Mudassir says Labour Party only gained total votes by 2%, yet got over 100 seats. Its popularity seems fake. That's because it is. They only got it because the Tory party collapsed, basically. Could neo-Nazism be the new Wahhabism and Eastern Europe be the new Middle East? Well, look, it's not new. I mean, like Wahhabism and Nazism, the people of both beliefs are they have been useful to the US as undercover operators for decades, and Nazis in Europe have been running Gladio type operations since World War II. So this isn't new. They're just bringing the good old tricks back again. No, Jonas, it's not Aston Villa. It's not Bolton Wanderers either. YepX says, do you think it would ever get to the point where Russia would just wipe Ukraine off the map? No. Not unless something like unthinkable did happen. The Russians don't need to do anything more at the moment than they're doing right now. They're slowly winning and grinding Ukraine down. I mean, how it's going to end is going to dictate the final tactics used, but I can't see them going to that point. They are serious about wanting to either to reconstitute another version, a version of the Ukrainian state, but one that, of course, has the 4 regions and Crimea taken out of it. So they want to retain as much of it as possible to work into a new union state, I think. Seagal is weird even for Hollywood. Yep. Personal friend of Putin, though. Blair is saying technology like AI can be used to cut government budgets. Well, of course he is. He's probably got shares in it. Yeah, diagnose yourself on a computer rather than visit a doctor. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that technology ends up being used for. Blair's probably got major shares in an AI medical company. That's why he's saying that. Eric says, I wonder if the indignant liberal protestations about accusations of Biden's senility aren't for them a calculated preference over having to defend his participation in genocide. Might be a motivation. Zarg says there's more puppets at the NATO summit than Thunderbirds. True. Iris Palizan says, I see that the collective West is going into overdrive regarding the cult of the Srebrenica so-called genocide today. The irony is that that was set aside to remember, but instead has ended up raising tensions. Yeah, I mean, the politicized usage of that is absolutely blatant. I mean, the idea that the West cares about genocide when it's committing one right now in Gaza, you know. And yes, Erdogan is making overtures to Assad because, again, he's got his deals to make. I think this is all a part of one big moving picture. And part of that is ultimately going to be the joining up of the 2 parts of Azerbaijan and the withdrawal of the Turks from Syria. So the neo-Ottoman plan fails in one direction, but the pan-Turkic plan starts to succeed in the other. What is Pashinyan's approval rating? Pretty fucking low, Jenny, I think. I don't know the exact number. Will the US try to convince European NATO members to send troops into Ukraine? Probably not. I mean, I could, because again, if NATO members go in openly as NATO, then they would be attacked and destroyed by the Russians. Then the US would have to respond or look weak. So the US knows they can't fight the Russians. So what they will do is they will go for the next option, which is they'll send mercenaries, they'll send people out of uniform, they'll send so-called volunteers, but they won't send an official force. Because as soon as that gets attacked and destroyed, the remaining mystique around NATO, what little is left, will be destroyed. So the only way they get out of this and retain some shred of credibility is if they get out with without directly fighting the Russians, because they can't, basically. If they thought that they could, they would have done it 2 years ago. If they thought that they could actually beat the Russians, they'd have gone in 10 years ago. They did, but it was all undercover. Zain Mudassir says US progressives are the only ones simping for Biden at this point. The elite media has rejected him. Yeah, that's true. The ruling class has decided that it's over. So Biden's about to find out a very painful lesson in politics. You build your whole career serving the ruling class. When they pull the plug on you, you are really, really fucked. Anyone else find it odd that Biden has deteriorated so much and had so many gaffes since the debate? Are they purposely not giving him his brain pills or what? I think that, maybe that, I don't know. I think, though, that if you actually watched Biden over the last few years, it was obvious that was going to happen. Because even in controlled environments that where he had all his instructions, like walk onto stage, is literally on a cue card written down for him. Stop at the mark. Look at the camera. Smile. Say this. Look down. Turn left. Walk off stage. Even that, he was fucking it up. Like, he managed the State of the Union speech just about, because they must have put him on some really severe stuff to get him through that. God knows what they were pumping him full of. Maybe they decided not to go with the full dosage of that, or maybe whatever the hell they had him on for the State of the Union wouldn't have been possible to have him on for the debate. Because all he has to do in the State of the Union is stand there and rant, basically. So you can juice him up with something pretty severe for that. In the debate, he's got to be able to respond to Trump and not just shout and scream and look weird. So maybe they tried a different regimen to enable him to do that, and it didn't work. Or maybe somebody just decided, no, fuck it, we're pulling the plug. We're going to give him placebos only, and we're just going to let him fall apart on camera. I don't know, but we would have to see. When Biden's doctors write their tell-all books, probably when Biden's dead, so in about 6 months, then we'll know. Marco Rubio as Trump's VP. That would make sense, given that is the complete merger of the Republican establishment and the Trump movement, and the real death of any independence of the Trump movement. Tax cuts for the rich will keep him safe, says Zag, with reference to Trump. That's true. Pence was governor of Indiana. Yeah, I thought he was a governor of somewhere. The original NATO headquarters is 10 minutes away from me, says Lino. That's unfortunate, mate. Albert Witch Vigler says they can't even safely deploy the aircraft to Ukraine. That's true. Will the US ever lift its sanctions against Russia? Probably not. Probably not. I am JK. But then again, the Russians have done quite well under the sanctions. It's weakened the worst comprador elements in Russia, and it's done so by doing a job that the KPRF long demanded, which is it's cut to a large degree the Russian compradors off from access to capital from the West or access to the West. And it was a comrade Joe Biden who did it all. His sacrifice will be honored in the coming revolution. Lee Williams says Rochdale. No. Robeson, West Brom. No. Zarg says my Biden impression is too comprehensible. Hey, man, you gotta remember, man, I've been to several Klan rallies. I need to work on it. Lee Williams says Chesterfield. No. Birmingham City. No. Blackburn. No. Bolton. No. Tranmere Rose. I like Tranmere, but no. Two Sugars has got it. Sheffield Wednesday. Prize to that man. The team I support is Sheffield fucking Wednesday. So enjoy mocking me for that one, because boy have we been shit for years. Sid says during the industrial labor struggles in the US during the 1890s, 1910s and 1920s, the working class encountered overt fascism. Yeah, and the argument is made by Rajani Palm Dutt that precursors to fascism were popping up as soon as the imperialist period begun. had begun. So, I think Sid's point there is a valid one. Svetlana, maybe I should support Spartak Moscow. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should go over there and watch a game. Morgan says, I have an old friend who now lives in Cuba who says who was a big West Ham fan back in the day. He says trips to Derby were the naughtiest of the lot. Derby back in the day, I mean, way back in the day, back when they were at Pride Park, that was a rough old ground. A lot of very, shall we say, enthusiastic atmosphere. Almir says, in Yugoslavia, the biggest clubs are still named Red Star, Partizan, and Dynamo, but their supporters are members of the most right-wing fanatical parts of society. Yeah, that's sad. Really is. What happens with clubs that were named after heroic communist struggles and get taken over by ultras that are ultimately run by some bourgeois guy or another. Yeah, I mean, to answer Jenny's point about it being convenient that he falls apart, that he's not suddenly fallen apart would be my argument. He's been falling apart this whole time. The difference is they lifted the veil. They gave permission to the media to report it. They stuck him out there for an hour, either not on the right regimen or not on anything, and knowing he'd fall to pieces because, again, they've decided to move on. They've decided to move on from Biden. They've decided to wind the Ukraine war down from its open phase to a covert phase and move on to China. Trump's the ideal candidate to do that. It's just sad that, again, working class people in the United States will be thinking that voting for Trump gets them something different when it doesn't. Does John Cena speak Chinese? This is an interesting question. Do I think Trump will go after the Democrats who went after him? Possible, but none of the big guys. Trump will get to... I mean, maybe they'll let him do over somebody like Merrick Garland, I don't know, but no, Trump will be told that the priority is stability, so he can go after some symbolic targets, but I don't think he'll get to go after anybody from this administration because the Republican Party bigwigs will be told that stability is the order of the day, and that Trump gets to be president and gets to go around saying he's president and saying "Make America Great Again" and doing various things, opening new arms factories, etc. But he doesn't get to use the presidency to enact his personal vengeance because they'll want stability now. They'll also, I mean, maybe it would be in their interest to have Trump or to have Trump's supporters in the administration go after some symbolic targets that would wind up and sort of rile up US liberals. Because what they'll need as well, they'll need to reconfigure the Democratic Party for when either Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer has a go in 4 years' time. So what they'll need to do is they'll need to reinvigorate the Democratic Party. And you get that by essentially scaring the left, the petty bourgeois left, back into the Democratic Party again. And you do that by basically winding them up by having Trump hit them on cultural issues and abortion bans, maybe going after certain Democratic Party officials, perhaps, and rallying the left back into the party, reinvigorating its ranks, and getting it ready to beat the big bad orange fascists' heir to the throne, Marco Rubio, in 2028. Tom makes the good point, which is that the Republican Democratic parties in the US are not parties. They are corporations. We've got one of those here as well. Biden, it's true, he's the first black woman and the first black president. He can also marry himself. Slightly too young to remember the glory days of Waddle, Tim, yes. I did see Sheridan and Waddle play, but they were both, shall we say, over the hill by that stage. Oh, yeah. Irish Partizan's right. Derby played at the old ground was the baseball ground. The new ground is Pride Park. So yeah, the one with the atmosphere was the old baseball ground. Do I recommend the Leontiev Soviet Political Economy Manual from '53? Yes, the original version of that is good and is a very good reference book. Might Trump choose Tulsi Gabbard for his VP? No, it'll be somebody who's served his time in the Republican Party. That's who it will be. It won't be some Democrat defector, even though she's done a lot to, pucker up and kiss Trump's ring. What will end up happening is because the way it's gone, what'll go on is that the Republican Party will tell Trump, this has got to be the guy. This is going to be the guy. This is Rubio. He's your man. And Gabbard hasn't served her time in the Republican Party. I think these things do matter to the people who run these organizations. Irish Partisan says, Partizan Belgrade still have the old Yugoslav ethos. Well, that's interesting. And the chairman was a Bosnian Croat named Ivan Kirkovic. The nationalist ultras hated him. Interesting point. Okay, we're going to bring things to a close for this evening. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon. Go to there to hear the latest special Patreon's episode on the theory of the Israel lobby. That's out today. The audio of this will be up there later tonight. I'll be away this weekend, but I'll be back broadcasting on Monday. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Enjoy the weekend, and I'll be back with you on Monday.